Hello chaps and chapettes, today we're going to be looking at resistance and how different factors of the material actually make things resist electricity in different ways. And for that we're going to look at something particularly gross, and I've spent a lot of time actually making it for you. I'm looking forward to showing it to you. So anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at three things. First of all, we need to know how what resistance does in a circuit, and then you need to be able to understand how resistance of a material changes depending on its length or its cross-sectional area. We also need to have a look at what's called an ohmic resistor and actually how resistance changes in a filament light bulb. Basically, there's going to be a small secret on there which we need to show you. And today's challenge is going to be, what do you think the resistance of, say, a human is, or the resistance of some complicated object is? Because it's not as easy as you might think. I mean, you have lots of different components going into a person or into something as complicated as like a car. But I want you to figure out what would be the resistance for certain things. Let me know down in the comment section below and we'll get on. But before we go on to actually looking at stuff, make sure you hit the like button for me so that people can find this and it gets found on the YouTube algorithm really easily. So let's have a look first of all at what resistance is in a circuit. Okay, it's really quite simple. You have electrons whizzing down a wire. And if you've got electrons whizzing down a wire, it's going to hit stuff, okay? And that stuff is going to hit, it's going to be the atoms. Now remember we looked at current before and we had this idea of the electrons sort of doing the Spider-Man thing, going from atom to atom to atom. Well, there's going to be a little bit of resistance every time they leave an atom and every time they go into an atom. And that's the resistance of a wire, right? You have this basically obstacles in the way. And the more obstacles you have in the way, then the higher the resistance is going to be. So some materials have like loads and loads of free electrons bouncing around, which means that there's lots of different paths for the electrons to take. That's like a metal. And the resistance of that is going to be quite low. Some have all the electrons locked up into various shells around atoms and things like that, and basically there's nowhere for the electrons to move. And because there's nowhere for the electrons to move, there is a lot of resistance. Okay? One interesting thing that happens with this though, if you get the electrons whizzing down the wire and they start bashing into atoms and stuff like that, well, they're going to impart a little bit of energy to the atoms they hit, which means that the atoms start to vibrate a little more, right? And because the atoms start to vibrate a little more, that's basically temperature, that's heat, energy building up. So if you have a current going down a wire, provided you have some resistance, you're going to get a little bit of heating. Now think about this, if you've got those atoms like bouncing around a bit and the electrons trying to go around them, because they're moving around, they're more likely to actually hit the atom, which means that the resistance has gone up. They're getting in the way some more. So basically they impart some more energy on there, heating up the atom some more, which makes it more likely for the electron for it to get in the way of the electrons, which means that they're going to get heated up more by the impact of the electrons, which means that they like to get a little bit more heat and so on and so forth. This thing's called thermal runaway. Basically you put a current through something and then it gets really hot really quickly, the resistance goes shooting up, and then you can start fires. So there we go. Right, now, okay, what I want to do now is show you how resistance of material can change with the length of material and also with the cross-sectional area. And for that, well, what we need to do very, very first of all is hit the like button, and then we're going to go back to the classroom and I'll show you this using my poo. So let's go and do this. And join me at the back. Right, chaps and chapettes, let's get started on this one. First of all, you have no idea how difficult it is to find polythene gloves these days. There's some sort of worldwide event which is going on, which means that everyone wants these things, but hey ho. Second of all, this is my poo. No, of course not, it isn't. That would be disgusting. This is actually conducting putty. And what this is basically some conducting particles inside a matrix which we can just move around. And honestly, this is really, really cold. So yes, this conducting putty is freezing. What I'm going to do now is just play with it a bit to warm it up so it can be a little bit more malleable. The reason I'm wearing gloves is because this stuff, well, basically, look, it makes horrible black marks everywhere. Well, it's not too bad. I guess it's because it's cold. Okay, this is really irritating. Okay, hang on. This is going to take a little bit more work than I thought. Right, now, I've manipulated the putty. Just touch that stuff there. Okay, it's horrible stuff actually. It's all over your fingers. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this device, which is a multimeter, and because I'm lazy and just want to get the point across, I've set it to its ohm meter setting, which basically means it directly measures resistance, okay? There is a better way of doing this, which you need to know for GCSE, but I'll cover that in the next video. So what we're going to do now is we're going to place this, these two contacts both across there, and, oh, crikey. Huh. Yeah, there we go. We've got some resistance there, okay? And it's wildly fluctuating up and down because this is actually quite sensitive on there. So, wow, what happened there? Dodgy connection. That's fine. Okay, let's just see if we can maneuver that so that you guys can see it a bit more clearly. There we go. All right, cool. So there we go. We've got a resistance reading coming through. That's going to go up and down, and in fact, it's going to go up and down depending on how warm this thing gets. Just touched it there. Shouldn't have done that. So we've got actually a substance here, and right now it's got a cross section like this, where it's sort of thinnish and it's a bit long. And what we're going to do is we're just going to squeeze these together. And what that's going to do is it's going to shorten the length of our substance. And because it's putty, it's going to spread out. So we're actually going to increase the cross-sectional area. And you should see something happening to the resistance. Here we go. Just go like this. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And you can see even with just that small amount there, the resistance is starting to drop like crazy. Just let that settle for a bit. And you can see the resistance has dropped down. So basically we've made this shorter and fatter, and because of that, it's offered less resistance, okay? So if you want to increase your resistance, you need to have something which is very thin and very, very long, okay? If you want something which is low resistance, let me just finish this, high resistance. If you want something low resistance, you want something short and fat, low resistance. Now you want to think about this in terms of like water actually. If you've ever got a long thin pipe, it takes a lot of effort to push water through it. I mean, you have to push it from one end to the other, so it's some distance to go through, but it's also difficult to squeeze all that water in through a tiny hole. If you've ever tried to breathe through a straw, like one of those little plastic straw thingies, you know how difficult that is. If you want to get water to flow really quickly, make a nice big wide pipe and make it short, and that water will get from one end of the pipe to the other relatively easily, barely any inconvenience really. So that just flows straight through. And the same thing is true of electricity. I mean, for different reasons. The reason why the cross-sectional area helping, making low resistance there, is because there's more charge carriers to actually move things along. Basically, there's more places for the electrical energy to pass through. So it does work exactly analogously with water. Long and thin, high resistance, short and wide, low resistance. Well, there you go. So that's basically how resistance can change within different materials. You want to make it something of higher resistance, make it longer. If you want to make it lower resistance, make it wider. So if you're having like a big power cable, nice, big and wide, if you want something to have high resistance, make it teeny tiny. And yeah, there we go. So what we need to do now is have a look at ohmic material, of ohmic resistors and a filament light bulb. Because of the heating element that electrons passing through a wire has, in a filament light bulb, the resistance is going to change compared to what we call an ohmic resistor, or basically a bog standard resistor, something that's going to stay relatively constant. So let's go to the back of the classroom again, making sure we hit the like button on the way, and let's go. Right, so this is an ohmic resistor, and what that means is it basically, well, behaves as a resistor. This is a filament light bulb, and it does not behave. So this is how we got to imagine this. Our ohmic resistor is going to have a graph like this. Now don't panic, I will explain this graph later on. But we have voltage here and current here. So if we pass some current through it, and you have some voltage across it, well, actually, if I put a voltage across this resistor, when do you get some current? Start again. We have some voltage across this resistor. We should get some current out. Now, ordinarily, our independent variable will be down here with the dependent one up there. Honestly, I've done it this way around because it makes the math easier, and you'll see why in the next video. But if we have our ohmic resistor on there, what we end up with is a nice straight line, okay? And that means that the resistance stays the same, no matter what voltage we put across it, no matter what the current is. And there we go, that's an ohmic resistor. It follows Ohm's law, more on that later. So this thing is not an ohmic resistor. This is a light bulb. And light bulbs are caveman technology because they basically make something hot and then you get light out of it. So we've evolved all the way from the point of having a campfire to this, where our campfire is just contained inside like a glass bulb. And there you go. So the ohmic resistor follows a nice straight line. Ohmic, okay? However, the light bulb will not, and there's a reason for it. Here we go. If we put low voltage on this thing, then we end up having an ohmic resistor, basically the same thing. So we'll get a nice long line, a nice long line like this going up. However, as the current goes up, or the voltage goes up, we get more and more current, and the light bulb, the filaments inside, starts to heat up. Now, because of this thing called resistance heating, the resistance starts to go up. So even though we have higher and higher voltage, we're not getting as strong an impact on the current, right? So we end up getting this curve effect going on, and that's going to continue like that. Now, eventually, we will get to the point where the current is so hot, this thing's actually going to melt, and that's what we use in fuses and things. But basically, a filament light bulb follows this pattern instead. Voltage goes up and up and up, and current goes up and up and up, trying to fight through the extra resistance caused by the heating up of the light bulb. And, well, there you go. You end up getting this almost infinite resistance at some point, but, well, there you go. It starts to fail. Let's just, let's not do that. So, there we go. And, well, there you go. Light bulb has a curve like that. And an ohmic resistor has a straight line like that. I will explain more about how this graph leads into resistance later on. But takeaway from this one, light bulb has more resistance as it goes up in voltage, and the ohmic one stays the same resistance all the way through its life cycle. So there you go. So there we go, guys. That is the difference between an ohmic resistor and a filament light bulb. In terms of resistance, at least, there's loads of differences there. I mean, one's a light bulb and one is just a lump of metal, really, but there you go. So what you should have picked up from today's video is that you should know what resistance is in a circuit, and in any material, actually. You should also understand how the resistance is going to change with the length of material or with the cross-sectional area. And you should also be able to explain the difference between an ohmic resistor and a filament light bulb, talking about that resistance heating and how things are going to change. The challenge today was to figure out what the resistance is of like people or like cars or whatever interesting thing you can think of. Because I'm really kind of curious what different resistances are out there. I want you to be able to quantify this. Let me know down in the comments section below what you come up with, and there we go. Make sure you hit the like button on the way out, and I will catch you in the next video.